Today is the 15th day of Elul, the 18th of September. We're halfway through Elul. That's a scary proposition. 14 more days. Exactly 2 more weeks. And we'll be Erev Rosh Hashanah. It'll be long, long davening. All the slichas.
Rosh Hashanah is
Thursday.
Oh, that's right. The Shabbos is the after.
Right. Okay. So we're up. So we explained what a troop is and what these diagonals are. And now he's going to start using this. והנה המשכה ממידות אלו דאצילות בביאה להיות התערבות המלאכים באמצעות המלכות, שהוא בחינת דיבור העליון המלביש לעמידות. So now he says, all this was what happens in the world of emanation. Meaning that these troops, these angels, the way that they are camped and the way that they're divided and that they come each one out of their root, this is all in the world of emanation. And just to remind us, the world of emanation is a world in which there is only consciousness of God. There's no self-consciousness at all. Everything is just godly. So that's why they only have godly consciousness. They don't have a consciousness of themselves as being something separate. It doesn't mean that they don't do things that are separate from one another. They do, but they don't have a consciousness that they're different from one another. Or especially from God. And then to bring it down into the 3 lower worlds, which is what our consciousness inhabits, the worlds of creation, formation, and action. So that is what the kingdom of emanation, the Malchus of Atzilus, that's what it does. And how does it do it? It does it through the supernal speech, Dibur Elyon. What does this mean? It takes המלביש לעמידות ומצירופי אותיות הדיבור מתהווים המלאכים. So it takes all these different measures that have now been combined together by these diagonals, which we explained yesterday according to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, means like seeing the nothingness. But it's when 2 things that are opposite or different can combine. And one would ask, what if there's no consciousness of separation in the world of emanation? What does it even mean that there's a diagonal? Why do we even need a diagonal? They're not separate. Meaning, their chesed and gvura are not separate. So that's why I said that they may not feel separate, but they do provide different functions. So even though they themselves are not going to argue amongst them, they get along in the world of emanation, but they do need to be combined. And to be combined, they have to have some level of nullification. Now one would ask, so what's the nullification there? You just told me that there's no separation, so what are they nullifying? So about this, the Alter Rebbe says that even in the world of emanation, there's a husk, there's a klipa. You wouldn't normally think this. You would say, but you see that if you need a diagonal to combine them, if you need something to combine them, there must be something that needs to be removed, some nullification. So the klipa in the world of emanation, the husk that creates the separation, even though it's not a conscious separation, but there is separation, is called re'uma. Uma was one of Esau's wives. And the name, it's not because necessarily she is Esau's wife, although that's also connected, but the name is what's important here. And the way that this name is understood is Re'uma, see my nullification. Meaning they have nullification. That's why they're in the world of emanation, because they don't feel separate. But even having nullification can be a cause for not being separate from someone else necessarily, but for feeling oneself. For feeling the self as being something special. And what they sense about themselves is their nullification. And so that's called re'uma, see my nullification. See my ability to nullify. And now that connects very strongly with the idea of a diagonal, the way we explained it from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, who says it's to see the nothingness. Meaning it's not just to see the nullification, that is the klipa, that's the husk, but rather to see ein, see nothing. If you can see me as nothing, it's almost like I'm transparent. then I've canceled my klipa. I've canceled what keeps me apart from everything else in this world. So it's just a little nitpicky, but you need to understand what's going on here. So the measures are what exist in the world of emanation. Now, for the angels to come out, we've talked about this many times, there's no angels per se in the world of emanation. There are, but there aren't. We divide them into camps in the world of emanation. So we say there's Michael and there's Gabriel, Michael and Gabriel, but they're like camps of angels. Like what we said, the troop. The troop is there. But the angel himself is not in the world of emanation. The angels start from the world of creation and below. And that's why Ezekiel, in his vision of the chariot, he sees only 3 types of angels. The wheels, or ofanim, which are in the world of action. The chayot, the living ones, living creatures that are in the world of formation. And the srafim and the seraphs, the ones who burn themselves, they're in the world of creation. In and of itself, there's something we call the angels of the hosts, like the heads of the camp, that they exist in emanation. But what we mean there really is that it's another name for the troop. So there's the troop of Gabriel, there's the troop of Michael. Anyway, a lot about angels. It's not really important if you don't find a modern equivalent. And so if you read, Rav Ginsburg has a book called Lectures in Modern Physics, and there he builds the whole correspondence between all these levels of angels and different types of angels and the quantum mechanics. And then all the different types of particles. There's a different two main types of force particles and matter particles. So he builds it beautifully, the whole correspondence. Not to say that these particles are the angels, but it says that that's a way to grasp the whole concept. In any case, getting back to here. So to actually bring it down, that is the speech. That's the speech that brings these letters together, that brings these names together. And so you see this very interesting thing. He says, וזהו עניין צירופי השמות של המלאכים, הדריאל, יופיאל, and so on. כמו שכתוב בספרים, ששמו אשר יקראו לו הוא הצירוף המחיה אותו. And so there's all kinds of books on biblical and Talmudic angelology, like all the different angels. And what you see there very quickly is that where they get these names. But the most important thing is the name of the angel, the name. So important that when the Arizal in the 16th century, he creates the intellectual shift in Kabbalah. He turns Kabbalah into something much more intellectual, much less practical. One of the things that he forbade to do is to pronounce the names of the angels. He said, stop doing this, because we're not there anymore. It's not that it's not true, it's just that we're not holy enough for this anymore. We're not pure enough for this anymore. And it'll only backfire on you. But the way you see is that any connection that you have with an angel is through the angel's name. And these names are always some kind of combination of letters from somewhere. So for instance, there's only one or two places where we name the name of an angel in prayer. And one of them is after Hallel. I don't know if you've noticed, in Chabad, after Hallel, there's this short thing that we say.
Yes.
And it's based on the verse, Vashem berachet Avraham bakol, that God blessed Abraham with everything. And then we say, Zvada yishmereni v'yichayeni, that this thing called Zvadia. So Zvadia is the name of an angel. Why can I say it? Why do we say it there? Because it's also the name of a person. So like Michael, Gabriel, these are names of people also. So when it's also a name of a person, so we mean the person, we don't. And so we can say it, we can pronounce it. But all the other names are so weird. They're like, they take a verse, and Zvadia is, by the way, the same thing, even though it's the name of a person. How do you get it out of the verse, and God blessed Abraham with everything? So we once wrote an article in Wonders to explain it. But it's a whole meditation, like how you get that name. Okay, so it comes out of these. You see that even creating the names or figuring out the names of these angels, really what you're doing is you're taking letters from the Torah, from a verse, or from the Tanakh, and combining it in a certain way to get the name. So what are these names really? They are combinations of words and verses in the Torah. That's what they really are in the end. Unless the Torah mentions that this is the name of an angel, like it does in a couple of places. The angel that came to Manoach and his wife, Tzalfonit was her name, we know from the rabbis, the parents of Samson. Or the angel that Daniel saw, who says, my name is Gabriel. He says his name. In any case. So these names are really combined. They're a combination of letters that were brought together from certain verse or verses together. And that's how they are formed. And that is the combination that enlivens that angel. So the way to think of an angel is like it's energy from the Bible. That's really what it is. In the end, that's what it is. Because God didn't write a book for angels. There's one book. It's called the Torah. That's all. And that gives life force to everything, including this whole realm that we call angels. Now today, a regular person doesn't even care. What does it matter? And I'm saying there's no reason to. Nobody uses this. It's not like a long time ago that was how people saw the world. We don't discount what the previous generations saw. We don't think that it was wrong, but we do feel that either we're not at that level or it's just not relevant to us. But what did we learn from this? We learned about the power of combinations. And to understand this, and this is where it really touches us, now he says, and this is where we're going to start seeing how this is related to davening. To understand this whole thing about these angels and the letters that you put together and you get their name, we can understand this from the way in which we express or bring into consciousness a certain feeling in us through our speech. And he gives an example. When the emotion or the feeling is still in our heart, when a person loves something, has an affinity for something, he wants something, he craves something, but it's still in his heart, then that love or that craving is a simple entity. Simple entity meaning it can't be pronounced. We can't hold on to it. מה שאין כן, כשמגלה ומפרש אותה לזולתו על ידי אותיות הדיבור, הרי היא מתחלקת לחלקים. But when I express this to someone else through my speech, or even express it to myself, the speech causes it to break down into parts. Before it was a simple entity, I had no front or back or anything, I couldn't observe it, I couldn't analyze it, I couldn't do anything with it. And now I begin to have something I can take apart. It's complex. Now, let's say I'm describing, the way that usually this is explained is, I want to build a house. So the house in my heart, we call it, mind's heart, is a simple thing. I haven't gone into the details. But now when I begin to explain to the contractor what I want, so everything breaks down into the smallest granular pieces. Further and further. The same thing is true with a feeling I have towards someone. Like we say, do not hate your fellow in your heart. Why? Because if it's in your heart, you'll never get rid of it. You'll never work it out. You'll never be able to do it. Same thing is true with someone who has anxiety or anything like that. If you keep it in your heart, you'll never be able to get rid of it. You'll never be able to live with it. You're never going to be able to come to terms with it. And even that idea of coming to terms, saying is like come to terms is like break it apart. You do this through speech. That's why it's called speech. That's why the talking cure. That's what they initially called it. But it's nonsense because it was around for since man was created, and we see this because when God wanted to accost Adam about eating from the tree of knowledge, he opens up speaking to him. Why speak? Because speech is what resolves these issues. Speech is how you break it apart into pieces and you begin to analyze it and think about it and then eventually get rid of it. So every sentence you now say about your object of desire or your craving, whatever it is another piece. It's giving another aspect to this thing that's simple. Now, what he really means is that when it's in your heart, it's like a spiritual entity. And spiritual entities have no parts, because the spiritual is simple, it's not complex. So even when I say the word bus, right? So that's a simple word. Nonetheless, it's already a word, but let's say I just have the image of a bus in my head. The pieces don't come out, the pieces of this bus, unless I have words for every single piece. I always quote this in the name of Umberto Eco, because when I read one of his books, I don't remember what the first one was, I guess it was The Name of the Rose, but it didn't come out there, it came out in one of his other books. He knows more words than I'll ever see, and he can use them. So he describes something on a ship. And it was, I think, the island of the day before yesterday, or something like the day before tomorrow, I don't remember what it was called. He describes the ship with words that you suddenly realize every single thingamajig on a ship has a name. It's scary. And there are, I don't know, tens of thousands of these little, gadgets there. And every single thing has a name. Each knot has a different name. Each peg, every rope has a different name. Every sail, of course, has a different name. A person who's not in it doesn't know. So if I were to be building a ship, there's no way I could build it without knowing all these names. So articulating it is actually breaking it down into its constituent pieces. Now, if that's true about something which is relatively not so complex like a ship, think about something as complex as a human feeling. That can be, and so the articulation is what makes it into a real entity. Takes it from the spiritual realm and puts it into the realistic realm, where it's actually something. So the same thing is happening with these angels. They start out as something simple in the troop, where they are, and then the speech that comes down is articulating them, breaking them down into smaller and smaller entities, and each one plays its role. Each one has a particular. This has always been the way that we, do anything with reality. We analyze it by breaking it. There's no other way we know how to do things. We just take things apart. So you can take things apart very violently, like throw it at a wall and see if it. There's actually a joy in that. The joy in it is seeing the pieces. There's joy in seeing. It's not just the destruction. It's the understanding that this is built out of things, and I want to see what it's built out of. In a particle collider, that's also what we do. We take two protons and we smash them together, smash like the Hulk, and you get all these other particles that you didn't see before. So that's how we work. And the same thing happens with speech. The same thing is happening, he says, with angels, and we'll see that the same thing is happening when we daven, when we pray. We're articulating more and more and more pieces, as it were, of the simple spiritual reality as it comes down into our reality. And this we'll see more next week, tomorrow, God willing.